What's up, everybody? UFC 301 is officially in the books, and I'm going to be going through the entire card, giving my post-fight analysis and thoughts on each fight, starting with the early prelims. We'll work our way all the way up to the main event. I'll put the time codes down below so that if there are specific fights you want to hear me talk about, there you go. But let's waste no time and hop right into this, other than I want to say one thing first. You know all this talk around UFC 300 of saying Jim effing Miller? How about Jose effing Aldo, man? How about that? And I'm not going to cuss. I don't want to stay monetized and all that. But just know what I mean, man. Jose Aldo. We're going to get to that. Shout out to him, man. Unbelievable performance. But we're going to start with the early prelims. Alessandro Costa and Kevin Borjas. This was an interesting matchup, right? Anytime we see a guy like Costa, right? First of all, Borjas, the corner that she had with Grasso and team, and then we have, Costa over there. He's got Diego Lopez in his corner. We kind of got to see some shades of Diego Lopez a little bit. That aggressive forward boxing approach. He had some good leg kicks. And just the pressure of Costa is ultimately what was able to kind of be the difference in this matchup. While Kevin had really good boxing and he was on point, he started to get the jab working a little bit. He just seemed a little bit behind as he started to kind of open up a little bit more. Costa was just able to eat him, bite down, march forward, and land some of those good tight shots that we've seen very much like Diego Lopez land. That's what I'm saying, man. Whenever we see fighters that have some of these higher profile guys or guys on the rise in their corner or their camp, we see an influence from those other fighters on them, and there's really an uncanny kind of resemblance to me when we were looking at the way Costa approached this matchup. The forward pressure, his boxing is improving every time out. He's very aggressive. He's a problem. I like what we saw from him last night. And going out there and getting a finish, I mean, first of all, to open up UFC 301, right? There's a lot of noise, right? Saying that this card sucks and this and that. And I even mentioned before, like anytime we have these cards where people aren't exactly the most excited, we end up usually having some of the best prelims. And I think that, the prelims last night were I think they were pretty sensational. So really good fight to start the card, starting off with a finish. Shout out to Costa, man. That was a really good finish and just a really good performance overall. So, okay, moving on. We have Ismael Bonfim and Vinc Pichel. People are being really hard on Vince, and I'm one of those guys, man, who I did think coming into this fight, obviously, Bonfim was going to be able to get the job done, but we have to credit Vinc Pichel, right? The guy's in his 40s now. He's, first of all, the legendary mustache, and then the walkout. I like everything about Pichel, man. I think that he is a fun fighter, but we really got to see him wear that age last night, right? Bonfim is a guy who he's fast. He's kind of on the rise and on kind of the cusp of really kind of getting something going here in the division. And you just saw, man, he was getting a little sloppy as he started to get a little tired, but those combinations to the body, that left hook to the body that he was landing, coming upstairs with a right hook over the top, Bonfim looked good, man. And you could just see the speed was the difference, right? A lot of what I said for UFC 300 with Bobby Green and Jim Miller, this was kind of that similar type of thing here where I know that the age gap is a little bit greater here, but what we saw from Bonfim is speed kills. That's what I saw Bobby Green going to be able to do to a Jim Miller, just being a few steps ahead in terms of the speed. And if you're not able to solve the speed and have some answers, you're going to be in trouble. But Vinc Pichel, tough as nails, man. Every time he fights, I'm always tuning in because it's always a great fight. Vinc Pichel, every fight that he is in is pretty entertaining. He was just a little bit of a step behind. He was getting some good leg kicks going early on, and they were landing, they were working. He got away from it a little bit. And then when he tried to go back to it, Bonfim had a beautiful answer. He started checking some of the kicks, getting that leg out of the way. So nonetheless, Bonfim, man, keep your eye out for this guy. He's got that. We know about that knee up the middle. We've seen him even throw it last night. He has good striking, the way he goes to the body. He's starting to finally open up a little bit. And his patient approach is what really impressed me last night. Because whenever you get a young guy who kind of has this hype, and there was a little bit of bad blood between him and Vince. You couldn't tell because they were touching gloves and stuff throughout the fight. But leading up to this, there was a cancellation. There was some different things going on to where there was a little bit of animosity built up. And Bonfim, man, I was like, is he going to fight a little emotional? He looks a little tired, but he kept recovering, and he was very patient. Even when he was hurting Vince, he's like, man, this guy's tough. I'm probably not going to be able to get him out of there. Let me dig to the body. Let me, really try to just pick them apart and put, utilize the good boxing that we saw from Bonfim last night. So nonetheless, very good performance by Bonfim. I'm going to be curious to see what they do for him next because he's knocking on the door of fighting a ranked guy here sooner rather than later. Okay, moving on, we have Barbosa and Kareckaite. I got to be honest, guys. I thought Kareckaite could have won this fight. Like, I think that, one, anytime you have a swimming background like that, right? First of all, her walkout was kind of funny. I like how she walked out to I'm the Man by 50 Cent. I can't remember the last time we've heard someone walk out to that song. Reminded me of that song. I like that song, man. So, pretty cool walkout there. It was intense. You could see her corner was intense. They knew that this was going to be a tough matchup, but she looked good on the feet. You know, she's long, she's rangy, she's got good slick striking, in my opinion. I would have liked to have seen her open up a little bit, a little bit more, but I can understand, everyone's like, oh, well, just throw stuff. And it's like, well, you have to be cautious when you know that there's a grappling threat in front of you, because anytime you overextend on something, they're just going to duck underneath and take you down, and then you find yourself in a bad position, and then you're wasting energy trying to get back to your feet. But shout out to Barbosa. We saw the grappling. That is what can make the difference, right? If you're getting tagged up a little bit on the feet and you're in there with a good rangy opponent like Kareckaite, like, you have to be able to solve the range. And we saw Barbosa be able to do that, close her down. We saw just in the grappling exchanges that she seemed to have the edge there. But I really like what we saw from Ernesta last night. Big step up in competition. She's still very green. 5-1-1. I know Barbosa was only 7-2 coming in, but, just seeing that. Right, Kareckaite with the swimming background, she has that outstanding cardio. Like, I'm keep your eye on her, right? I followed her last night on social media because I'm like, I like what we saw from her. I like the grit, I like the tenacity, and that is always something I'm looking for in a fighter. And she just showed up and was all business. I learned more about her and was more excited to maybe see her fight next than I am to see Barbosa's fight next. Maybe that's just me because of I'm a big guy in terms of like the fighting styles, but nonetheless. Good performance by Barbosa. She got the job done. We saw that grappling, once again, can be a little bit of the edge in terms of what the judges are looking at. Okay, Mauricio, Ruffy, and Jamie Mullarkey. Now, coming into this matchup, I just wasn't sure what we were going to see from Jamie Mullarkey, because I've kind of been critical in the past of Jamie, where he seems like a good dude, man. Like, he's a likable guy. The problem for me is he's very robotic in his movement. You kind of see when he has the high guard, his patterns and his rhythm are very, very predictable. And when you're in there with a guy like Mauricio Ruffy, who I studied a little bit before watching him fight, because to be honest, I wasn't super aware on the guy. But you heard Dean Thomas last night, say like, oh, he's kind of reminding me of a young Conor McGregor. And it's like, I wouldn't go that far, but I understand where Dean is coming from, because I watched this fight back this morning before I made this video, because I wanted to see what Dean Thomas was really referencing. Because in the heat of the moment, I was like, what are you talking about, young Conor? And then I watched it back and without commentary, and you really got to see this guy kind of is like that, man. He is, he's an orthodox style of fighter. He's not a southpaw like Conor, but his hands are kind of low. He's in that kind of karate, taekwondo-esque style. He's very good with the range management. And when he was backing away, did you notice how he was closing his hands and kind of backing out like this, but he wasn't shooting his fingers out like this? I know Paul Felder gave him some credit on the broadcast live when that was happening, so shout out to Felder. Obviously, I've always said that Paul Felder, in my opinion, is the best color commentator in MMA, period. Better than Rogan, better than DC, better than all of them. Paul Felder is by far my favorite. Shout out to him. Just wanted to throw that in there. But nonetheless, Mauricio Ruffy is the guy to keep your eye on. His striking is sensational. He's got that pull too, a lot like Conor. The way he was setting it up, angling off, throwing it was beautiful. That jab was money. It was fast. Mullarkey was just not able to see it. And before Mullarkey could get any type of offense going, every time he seemed to think about trying to dip under and kind of come in with some shots, Ruffy was just like, bop, just touching him with the jab, throwing it at different angles, and he was just able to keep him away, keep him at range, and utilize that range. And then obviously the sweep was nasty. But nonetheless, man, keep your eye on Mauricio, because he has some outstanding striking. His timing, he's got great eyes. You heard DC say that, the way he's able to slide back and throw a right hand. He holds his hands a little bit low. So anytime you do that, you have to have good eyesight. Ruffy's got that, man. He's got a little bit of kind of that it factor to him in terms of the style. We'll see how he progresses moving forward. That's going to be a guy that we should definitely be keeping our eye on. Okay, so that's the early prelims. Let's move over to the prelim. We had Joaquim, Silva, and Drakkar Klose. I know that people aren't going, wow, Drakkar Klose, like, it was a decision win and this and that, and considering he's been on a little bit of a streak here, guys, like, don't take anything away from Drakkar Klose after this performance. I understand that there were some snoozer moments here and there, but this guy is a little bit later on in his career, right? He's not a young buck anymore, and we're starting to see him hit a little bit of a stride here. And I think the time is now for Drakkar. I think that we're going to need to see him get in there with somebody ranked. I know he referenced, I believe, Beneil Dariush, Jalen Turner, something along those lines. I like a him and Jalen Turner type of matchup. You know, if Jalen Turner's going to stay at 55, like, I think that would be entertaining. And Drakkar Klose, he has some pretty good striking, right? I thought we would maybe see a little bit more of that last night, but I understand that, you know, Silva does have some pretty good power, so he just was trying to hold him up against the fence, kind of wear on him a little bit, make it a dirty, grimy type of fight. But nonetheless, man, Klose does have pretty good grappling. And we saw he finds ways to win. If he's not being exciting, he still came away with a W. I would like to see him get a shot at somebody in the rankings. Not high up in the rankings. I don't think he's going to get a Dariush matchup, but someone towards the back end of the division. I absolutely think at where Drakkar Klose is at this point in his career, I think it's time for him to get an opportunity like that. But nonetheless, he got the win. Job well done by Drakkar Klose. Moving on, Elves, Brenner, and Orolbai. I can never really say his name. I have a hard time with that, man. Orolbai, he's just an interesting looking dude, man. When you look at him, he's a guy, man. He's a dude, and he kind of reminds me of anytime we see a guy kind of burst onto the scene like this that has some dangerous grappling, has some good power in his hands. It almost, I think they mentioned on the broadcast last night, a little bit of that Khamzat Chimaev type of feel. I mean, I'm not going to go that far because what Khamzat was doing early on in his UFC career was just running through people, making him look like he was making Khamzat, he was like looking untouchable pretty much, right? But what we see with Orolbai is he does have a lot of the fundamentals that do resemble something like that. He's got really good power in his straight punches that you saw him hurt Brenner kind of early on there before he even shot the takedown. And I don't even know if he knew that he hurt Brenner, which was kind of interesting to me, but nonetheless, he took him down. He was able to control this fight, and we just saw, man, anytime we get these young prospects that are on the rise that seem to have a very specific skill set that kind of separates them from other people and poses problems for other fighters. We got to see that last night for what he did to Elves Brenner. I'm going to be curious to see what happens with him moving forward, because whenever you get this kind of hype behind you, whenever you start to kind of put these wins together and you do have something that people are tuning into and there are these expectations, there's not a lot of time before they start throwing him into the rankings. I'll be curious to see maybe another fight or two before he gets a ranked opponent. But I would not be shocked if in his next matchup we see him fight a guy later in the rankings as well. It's like, whenever we see this, we see the UFC make moves like that. But nonetheless, great performance by Orolbai. I'm definitely tuning in the next time, or excited to tune in the next time he fights, because he has that specific skill set that is going to seem to cause problems for a lot of other guys in the division. Moving on, Carolina and Lucindo. Obviously not the most exciting fight to me, obviously, but nonetheless, what we've seen from Lucindo is with Carolina, it's always kind of been some of these matchups where we're like, when are we going to kind of see her break through, right? Whenever we see, especially in women's MMA in these divisions, they're not stacked and loaded to the gills, right? We've had some new names come over, like we've seen, Kayla Harrison come over, Holly Holm and is kind of fading away. We have Juliana Pena, Amanda Nunes has kind of walked away. So women's MMA is kind of wide open at this point to kind of make a name for yourself. And I think Lucinda is one of those that I think that she's kind of on the cusp of kind of throwing her name into that hat of kind of being like being a possible contender that can be a little bit of a refreshing thing to have in these divisions that are just so stale. But nonetheless, not a whole lot to take away here in this matchup. Was not my favorite fight on the card, but shout out to Lucinda for getting the job done. Moving on, Jack Shore and Joe Anderson Brito. Brito, man, I was excited to see how this matchup was going to play coming into this fight, because Jack Shore, he's someone I like watching. I think that he's a very well-rounded fighter. I like what we see from him on the feet. But Brito, nonetheless, coming into this, we knew that he was a prospect that is a guy to have your eye on, especially, being in front of the Brazil crowd. I was like, I feel like we're going to see him kind of go to another level. And we saw the check kick by Jack Shore, and we saw what happened there with the whole shin and the blood and this and that. And I know some different people are weighing in like, come on, man. Like so I'm not going to touch too much on that, other than the fact that we saw Brito is tough. We saw that you could put him in there with a guy like Jack Shore and he can hang. So I don't really want to take too much away from Brito in this matchup. Obviously, I would have liked to have seen this play out a little bit more, but nonetheless, shout out to Brito. And don't rip on Jack Shore, man. Anytime we see these prospects that are on the rise in the sport and they put them in there together, someone's always going to have to, someone's got to win the fight, right? So, don't let that take away from the fact that Jack Shore is an outstanding fighter. He'll be back, and he'll be back on his high horse. He's definitely a guy I like watching fight. Okay, moving on. Main card. Oh, we opened up with Paul Craig. Down here it had canceled for Pereira. I was like, wait a minute. Yeah, because then they moved him back against Potieria. So we have Paul Craig and Caio Borralho. Paul Craig is kind of at that point in his career where, we always like him for those intense face-offs, right? We like the face paint. We like the whole shtick that he seems to have. He dyed the hair. He kind of played that whole thing up this week. We're just not seeing the same Paul Craig that we've seen in the past. We're just not. In terms of the striking, Paul's never been a guy that's been known for having outstanding striking, right? But we knew, especially at middleweight, we saw him at 205 where that grappling seemed to be a difference. And this guy has impressive wins over some impressive people at light heavyweight. And it's like you'd think with him cutting down to middleweight that he would kind of be a little bit of a problem, which at first we got a little bit of a sample at middleweight where we were like, hey, Craig's going to be a problem. And then now it just seems in his most recent outings, these younger guys that have good speed and have good power are just causing him a world of problems because Borralho, we've seen, man, this guy kind of reminds me of Paulo Costa. He's aggressive. He pushes forward. He has dynamite in his hands. And we saw, man, that KO power is nasty. He does have good takedown defense. He's able to get back to his feet because if Paul Craig was going to win this fight, there was no mystery. He was going to have to try to take this fight to the floor. He was going to have to start working for submissions early on because with Borralho, you know that this man on the feet has a significant advantage over Paul Craig. So nonetheless, my takeaway is obviously Caio is legit. We kind of knew that coming into this fight. I just saw this being a little bit of a disaster for Paul Craig if he was not going to be able to take him down and submit him. But to me, this also shows that Paul Craig he's definitely towards the tail end of his career here. That was just not particularly a good showing by Paul. But don't want to take anything away from Borralho because this man is sensational. He's aggressive. He kind of has that. You saw him come out with the face paint to the weigh-ins. Fans are kind of starting to tune in to watch this man fight because he's a free spirit. That neck tat is crazy, man. And his style is exciting. So keep your eye out for him moving forward because his first shot in terms of, I know he has a ranking next to his name, but gets a taste of that late ranking guy on Paul Craig. I think that he might be getting a top 10 opponent next. So I'm going to be excited to see him fight next. Okay. Moving on, we have Michel Pereira and Potieria. I saw this being a disaster for from the get-go. Michel is just one of those guys that is just a wild card, right? And when he did that little backflip in the air and the knee landed on the dome of I was like, oh no, don't tell me that we're going to get some sort of DQ here or no contest or what's going to go on. Nothing happened there, which... Michel has to be careful doing that because at some point, if he does that and we have another ref in there, is that something that might get, if Mark Goddard sees that, if Herb Dean sees that, are we going to get a break in the action where they're going to go time and be like, go to neutral corners and do something about that? I don't know. But nonetheless, we can't take away from Michel, man. This guy is explosive. He is dangerous. I love him at 185 pounds. He's not draining himself of the weight cut. He has legit power in his hands. He's got some nasty, hellacious kicks. He does have good submissions, as we saw last night. But I just saw this being a disaster for Potieria coming into this matchup. I just thought Pereira had the advantage in terms of the striking, in terms of the grappling. I just did not see really any way for to win this fight outside of landing maybe a good shot and clipping him was something Michel didn't see. But nonetheless, Michel, man, keep your eye out. It's exciting to have another Brazilian contender in the middleweight division. Middleweight, man, is starting to get exciting towards the back end here with some of these guys on the rise. So shout out to Pereira. That was a very good performance. Moving on to light heavyweight. On paper, man, Anthony Smith should have won this fight. And we were talking about this on my pre-fight live, guys. We were all kind of saying, why do we feel like Anthony Smith is going to win this fight? And I even said on there, I'm like, I think he might. As crazy as that sounded, I'm like, Vitor Petrino, while he I think that this guy was kind of floating on cloud nine. You saw him at the pre-fight weigh-ins. Like, yeah, I'm this big jack dude. Like, I got the power. I'm just going to run through him. And I'm like, man, that grizzled vet side of Anthony Smith, I feel like might be a problem here. Because in the last fight, if we didn't get that Tyson Pedro, Vitor Petrino fight prior to this, maybe I wouldn't have felt so like wishy-washy with Petrino, but after that Tyson Pedro fight, I was looking at Vitor a little bit different. I got to be honest with you, because he seems to have a problem putting his foot on the gas. He does have a lot of power. He is very explosive and dangerous, but he doesn't open up enough, in my opinion. And we saw that last night to where he's trying to grapple with Anthony Smith up along the fence, and I'm like, Vitor, you have a power advantage in terms of the striking. You have some nasty leg kicks. Have you not seen what other guys have been able to do to Anthony Smith at range? Like, why are you not trying to implement that same game plan? I understand you're a big, strong dude, but to me, it was kind of weird trying to entertain the clinch and some of the grappling with Anthony Smith. And we saw Smith just pull guard man and subbed him. And I like this for Anthony Smith, because Anthony Smith, man, he's faced a lot of criticism, right? We know about kind of some of the delusional and bizarre takes that this man has and the on paper stuff and all the just kind of the ridiculous things that he says. But this man last night, dude, going in there to Brazil, into enemy territory and pulling off a win like that, it's impressive by Anthony Smith. Shout out to him, man, going in there, getting the thing done, because, taking out a young contender that's on the rise. It's in Brazil. The UFC's clearly kind of setting the stage for him to shine. Anthony Smith took that away, got the win, and got a finish. It wasn't just some boring decision or whatever. Got a finish. Impressive by Anthony Smith, man. Put some respect on his name, I guess, man. This dude, he's been around for a while. He's got like 50-some fights in his career under his belt. I figured, Big John McCarthy even said on the Weighing In podcast that he believes that the experience was going to be a little bit of a problem for a guy like Petrino in this matchup. Sure enough, there's exactly kind of what happened and what we thought in the live chat. So shout out to my fans, man, because we all kind of saw this one coming last night in the pre-fight live. Moving on, co-main event, Jose Aldo Jr., Jonathan Martinez. Well. I would just like to gloat here for a minute. Ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to the striking, when it comes to the boxing, when it comes to these different things, I have an eye for what's going on in there, man. And Jonathan Martinez, everyone's like, oh, the leg kick KOs and TKOs. And I even said in my breakdown videos leading up to this fight, everyone is looking at this fight incorrectly, and they're blowing Jonathan Martinez up to be something he is not, right? And I referenced again the Dak Prescott thing. We got empty calorie stats here, right? Your leg kick TKOing Adrian Yanez, who, yes, he's a good prospect. He's not Jose Aldo. Your leg TKOing Cub Swanson, who's older at the tail end of his career. Like, we're talking about Jose Aldo here. One of the greats, one of the all-time greats at bantamweight and especially at featherweight. And I figured with Aldo having that really good tight high guard, that tie stance that he likes to use, he was going to be able to deal with the kicks of Jonathan, and he was going to have a significant advantage in the boxing. And I said he was going to rip the body, work the body, throwing combinations. It's exactly what we did. He was just tagging up Jonathan Martinez. We saw Aldo do just fine in terms of the grappling as well, which I expected. Jonathan Martinez is a one-trick pony, man. He is very, very basic in terms of, he does have some decent straight punches, but it's all about the kicks for him. He is predominantly a kicker. He's very one-dimensional. And I'm like, you can't be one-dimensional going into a matchup against Jose Aldo. He's too technical, and he's too defensively sound in that tie stance. He's been boxing. He's really, towards the later part of his career, had a heavy emphasis on that boxing style. And we saw last night, his hands look crisp. They look clean. I know Jose Aldo's talking about going out there and doing some boxing, and I know there's probably a lot of money on the table for him to go do that. I would love to see him try to go on a run in the bantamweight division. Everyone's acting like he's in his 50s or something, man. This guy, he's in his late 30s. He still has a lot of fight left in him. He's still in great condition. We saw Merab's going to be getting a title shot, it looks like, against Sugar Sean O'Malley. Like, we saw how he did against Merab, and he goes out there and does really well against a contender, a guy that's on the rise in Jonathan Martinez, to where I think Jose Aldo should get a shot at somebody inside the top of the rankings. I think he could do, some damage, man. And I think Jose Aldo, if you gave him a top guy, in terms of the division, I know bantamweight is absolutely loaded, but if you gave him somebody and he could go out there and beat a guy on the top of the division, we could potentially be looking at Jose Aldo eventually getting another title shot or having an opportunity like that. But I don't know if we see him back in MMA. I know he's kind of been up in the air about that. It sounds like maybe he comes back, but nonetheless, shout out to Jose effing Aldo, man. It just sensational. It's kind of the way I saw the fight pretty much. To sum it up, that's exactly how I saw it playing out. There was too big of a deficiency in the boxing department of Jonathan Martinez where I'm like, he's just going to get picked apart by Aldo. Shout out to Jose Aldo, man. The King of Rio is back. All right, main event. The controversy. Steve Erceg, Alessandro Pantoja. People are calling out robbery. They're saying, no, it wasn't a robbery. Pantoja controlled him and all these different things. What I'm going to say is this. I have a problem with the judging criteria in terms of what the judges are actually scoring the fight on, right? We're talking about damage is what is supposed to matter, right? Are you being put in positions that are fight ending? Are you chasing submissions? Are you looking for ground and pound? Are you looking to advance position and do something with the positions? Not hold somebody down, not transition into different positions, and that's not what I'm talking about, which is what Pantoja was basically doing. He was landing almost next to none, no ground and pound, wasn't looking for submissions, was just looking to hold down Steve Erceg, like what we've seen the boring style of Pantoja do since he's been at the top of the division. Now we've seen him do it to Moreno, we've seen him do it to Royval, just hold people, control people, and do what it takes to just control the fight and win on the judges' scorecards. And once again, that's exactly what he did. I would have given this fight to Steve Erceg, right? I absolutely would have given the fight to Steve Erceg. That's how I scored it. When we're talking about damage here, that's what needs to matter most, right? In boxing, I know that that's a corrupt sport, but when we look at boxing, if it's a 3-minute round and 2 minutes and 57 seconds are me getting battered with a jab the entire time and I'm bloody and I'm, all bruised up, but I land a good check left hook and drop the guy, I steal the round. Why is it that, I understand that this is MMA and not boxing, why is it that someone can approach an MMA, a fight, not a wrestling match, a fight, and treat it like it's a grappling match and just hold people and not look for submit? I mean, hell, it's really not even a grappling match. It's a wrestling match because at least it's, in grappling, like we're going to see people looking for submissions. We're going to see different things. Like at least Bo Nickal's out there chasing submissions. Like Colby Covington and Alessandro Pantoja, like it's the same type of deal. They're just holding people down, trying to find a boring decision, in terms of the judges scoring it for them because they're controlling people and not letting people back to their feet and changing positions. But what is the threat here? What is the threat here that Alessandro Pantoja displayed to Steve Erceg? To me, Erceg was landing the better shots on the feet. He has the better clean striking. He was landing at will. He was getting that jab going. That nasty rear elbow that he was stepping in and throwing instead of a right hand at times was nasty. He was busting up the face of Pantoja. I thought he was doing more damage in what is a fight, not a wrestling match, a fight. I would have given it to Steve Erceg. I think Erceg won the fight. That's my take on it. But I want to hear from you all down in the comments. Like this video, subscribe to the channel. And also, I just want to mention, win or lose last night for Steve Erceg, this man showed that he belongs. It was a huge step up in competition for him. And nonetheless, I'm excited to see what he does next. But we just need somebody to take out Pantoja at this point. I don't know if it's going to be Amir Albazi or who it's going to be, but this boring style in the flyweight division is just not doing it any favors on what is a division that is always heavily criticized. But I want to hear from you all down in the comments. Subscribe to the channel. Help your boy out. I appreciate you all. See you next time.